Welcome back to Football Night in America crew. We are, off-season Football Night in America. We can't give the people too much time without us, so we love catching up. And today we got Rodney Harrison in here, man. Rodney, what you been up to? How's the off-season been?
Man, all season has been great. It's really nice to get to the weekends and not have to travel on the West Coast and come back East Coast and Midwest and trying to find it. My sleeping patterns have been off. I've been getting up at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, so I might have to go to bed a little bit later. But the all season has been fabulous. How about yours, Devin?
Man, it's been good. Obviously this is my first time like having a job, knowing what I'm doing going forward and being in the off season. So my wife's been taking full advantage. She got a to-do list from me daily of the things to do. I'm pick up and drop off at school with the kids, man. So all ahead, husband and dad thrown into the fire trying to make it work. So it's been really good, man.
I tell you, man, and mentally, it's going to be an adjustment for you going into the season because at certain times, like in the spring, there's certain times we start training. In the summer times, there's certain things we do. We go out on the sand and start working that, running hills. It's going to be different for you, but I'm glad you're with us, bro.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it is funny because you start thinking about my wife's talking about vacation. I started thinking about training, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm good. I don't got to worry about training. I go on vacation anymore." So, nah, man. And I think the cool thing about the off season now is I used to be so locked into what I had to do, and now I just get to enjoy football. I get to see all these different things. We talk about like looking at a team like Pittsburgh. They go out. They have a quarterback room last year with Mitchell Trubisky, Mason Rudolph,
Amazing.
and then the starter Kenny Pickett. And you look now, everybody's gone and insert Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. What'd you make of Pittsburgh making these moves and doing what they had to do to kind of revamp the whole quarterback room?
Dude, I was really excited when they got Russell Wilson, and then when they traded for the Justin Fields. I'm like, wow. I mean, the quarterback room just instantly got better, got more talent. You talk about the experience of Russell Wilson. He played well. I thought he played solid last year. And when he had an opportunity, it's just that Sean Payton did not want him as a quarterback. But the thing that you're going to get with Russell, you're going to get a lot of hard work. You're going to get a guy that's going to come in every single day and put the team first. Guys may not like his personality, but this guy is a winner. He fights and he claws, and he's going to give you an opportunity. But then they still have the young fella, Justin Fields. They can still work into that offense. It's not like he's just going to be sitting on the sideline holding a clipboard. He's 6'3", 235. He can run like a deer. I just want to see him compete. I want to see these two guys compete. Don't give Russell the job. It's just okay if you want to give a veteran and say, okay, he's the starter right now. But I want to see these guys compete in training camp and both get a fair shot.
Yeah, and I love the impact of the room now that these two guys are there. You look at Pittsburgh, we used to say it all the time in the studio last year. Somehow they're going to find a way to get into the playoffs, and you're watching them struggling to score. Every team's outgaining them in yards, but still they're somehow winning games. And now you bring in these two guys, you can I think the defense is going to get better because they're going to feel like we have a great chance to win now that we have these guys. And I think you hit it on the head. Russ played good football last year. He played his style of football, taking care of the ball, making some off-schedule plays when they showed up. But I think because of the relationship with him and Sean Payton, we all have this kind of outside perspective of like Russ isn't good anymore. And I'm excited for him to get a chance to prove to everybody I'm the Super Bowl winning quarterback. I'm the guy who led Seattle to all those great seasons. And I think guys like Cameron Hayward, TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, those guys are going to be more energized. They're going to get ready to go because now they're saying forget win games and get into the playoffs. We got guys in our quarterback room that can get us to the title game, get us to the AFC Championship, give us a chance to win the AFC North. So I think anytime you can change.
It gives you hope, brother. And I played when we had the worst offense when I was in the Chargers. We had the worst offense in the league, and we had the best defense. And we felt like we never had hope. We would go out there, we would play hard, we would hold teams to 15, 16 points and under, but we never had hope. And when you look at Russell Wilson compared to, say, a Kenny Pickett, and you look at Justin Fields and the different things that you can do within the offense with those two guys, it gets you excited. And then the young weapons. the offensive line, Jalen Warren, those guys just being able to run the football, being able to establish that physical nature up front. I'm really excited for Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, and I think, like you just, I think Mike Tomlin is going to be the X factor because you talked about competing. I think he's the guy who breeds competition and that whole building about bringing guys in, not giving it to anybody and making them work. And I think what you said is so true. I think Russell start off as a quarterback, but as Justin Fields gets in there, he makes plays, he does different things. They're going to find ways to implement him in that offense. And I think for every team, it's scary when you play offenses where you're not 100% sure what you're going to get. Yes, when you used to play against the Tom Brady's and the Peyton Mannings, that's the elite of the elite. Not many people are going to have the opportunity to have that style of quarterback, but the element of the unknown, I think, should give Pittsburgh a chance with a great running game, like you said, with Warren and Najee Harris. So you love to see it. And then I think what we all love to see in the NFL is all of these quarterbacks in new cities and new situations. And we were texting, and you were like, I want to talk about Atlanta. I want to talk about Kirk Cousins and what Atlanta has done down there. And I think one of the key things that everyone is probably going to talk about is, what is the missing piece? Now that you add Kirk Cousins, is this a team now is straight, we're going to win the NFC South and be in the NFC Championship, be in a Super Bowl? Do you think this team has that opportunity to go do that?
Oh, definitely. I think this is the move that solidified them winning this division. I put them as the favorites in this division. Kirk Cousins is the guy that you can win with right now. I know he's 36 or whatever. He takes great care of himself. He's coming off an injury, but I do believe that he's going to be fine. But you look at what they have on offense. The offensive line is secretly one of the top 5 or 6 offensive lines in all of football. They have some young weapons. I think you're going to see Kyle Pitts really take that next step in his progression. And then no one talks about, we talk about Bijan, but Tyler Algier, he's a stud. I mean, they got 2-3 running backs that they can physically run the ball 30, 35 times if they want. The biggest problem with Atlanta was in the fourth quarter offensively, and a lot of those close, tight games, those divisional games, Desmond Ridder, he just could not pull it out. Kirk Cousins will give you an opportunity. He's not going to throw the ball to somebody wearing green. He's not going to throw the ball to somebody wearing purple in those critical moments. And I think that was an element of their offense that they were missing, Devin.
What do you think about when people say Kirk Cousins playoff games? He's not a winner in the playoffs. He's not going out there and winning multiple playoff games. Why are we giving him a $180 million contract? What do you think about that as an analyst now, but even as a former player, when you were in locker rooms, what does it still mean to have a guy like Kirk Cousins, but also have that criticism?
Well, I don't care about the criticism. What I look at is the person. I look at, what we go to work with every single day. We as players, we know, despite what the outside people say about certain players, we know if that person comes in, if they're committed to the team, if they're working hard, if they're showing up early, if they're doing all those little things. And then also look at the team and the surrounding pieces around them. When I looked at Minnesota, it wasn't like nobody was afraid of their roster. Like you start running, you start on wide receiver, but outside of that, and TJ Hawkinson, he got hurt. But no one was really afraid of all those weapons like that. So when I look at Arthur Blank, I think he's in his 80s, the owner of the Falcons. He wants to win now. He doesn't have another 20 years to wait. And when you go out and you get a guy like Justin Fields, which everyone was clamoring for Justin Fields here in Atlanta. And my thing is, you get a young guy, very athletic, but you just don't know if he's going to be able to stand in that pocket consistently and make those throws. And I know Kirk Cousins can.
Yeah, and I think that is the biggest thing for me. I think anytime we talk about Pittsburgh and what they did, and you just said the main word, hope. It gives that whole locker room hope. Now you implement Kirk Cousins, a guy who's been tossing the ball all around the field the last few years, unbelievable stats. And I think we always are so quick to judge a quarterback by the playoff wins, what he does as he wins Super Bowls. And that's the only time we totally forget about the team. We just talk about the quarterback. But does this team have the people and the right pieces to go win in the playoffs? And I think you said, I think Atlanta has it. I think the thing that they need now is a guy like an edge rusher, a guy that can come in and be a presence on the outside and rush, having Grady Jarrett inside. He's been a beast for a while. I still remember playing him in Super Bowl 51. The guy had 3 sacks in the Super Bowl, and he's still playing at a high level. But I think adding a guy in the draft that can be a difference maker to rush the passer, can make that defense even more prolific. Both of us know we have a love for safety. So they have a guy, Jesse Bates, that I think is a difference maker that can change and impact games in a huge way. And so I'm excited to see this team. We've continued to talk about the NFC South not being the strongest division in football. And I think Atlanta said, you know what? We're going to change this outlook by bringing a guy in. We're not going to worry about the cost and all of that because they know, and Raheem Morris said it when he took over, I'm probably not here if this team had a different quarterback in them last year. And he said, you know what? The first thing I'm going to do is make sure I'm still here by going to get Kirk Cousins and getting a guy that can play quarterback at the high level.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it the right way, is they had the right guy. I know Coach Belichick, he was trying to get that Atlanta job. Raheem Morris, I thought they made the right decision ultimately going with Raheem Morris. He's a young coach. He's got a lot of energy, a lot of respect. He holds that locker room accountable, and people respect him. He's a guy that I've had a chance to talk to, have conversations with, and I think he's going to bring that positive energy. I think he's going to be dynamic for the Atlanta Falcons. And I tell you, Atlanta will win this division this year.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I think they win the division. I think we see Kirk Cousins with all the big gold chains. So everybody going to be rocking. Ludacris, Young Jeezy, Maria will be happy because Atlanta will be winning. So it'll be good times, man. Let's get into some safety talk, man. I think one of the guys that we both enjoyed seeing live and in person was CJ Gardner-Johnson this year. We saw him in the opener, and then we saw him in our last game in Detroit against Tampa, just the way he plays the game. What do you think about like him going back to Philly? And there was a few of these players who left teams, and then a year later, they missed the team, but the team also missed them in Philadelphia, falling apart at the end. What do you think CJ Gardner-Johnson will bring to this team again?
I thought when he played for them the last year, a couple years ago or whatever it was, I felt like that was a perfect fit. I felt like instead of playing on that 1-year deal, he played extremely well. I think he led the team with interceptions. I felt like they should have extended him. They should have never let him walk out that door, because when you get a guy that's that passionate, that's a difference maker, a guy that's physical, a guy that brings personality and attitude, a guy that's a tremendous leader. Yeah, he's got some growing up to do, but you want to see that feistiness. You want to see him out there talking trash and getting everybody riled up. That's what you want. And then they let him go and walk and to come back. That was a smart move, because once again, he's a playmaker. He's a difference maker. You look at Kevin Byard. Kevin Byard's been a tremendous safety for a long time, but he wasn't the answer out there. You need a young, hungry dog, and CJ Gardner-Johnson is that guy. He's a tremendous leader, and I think they made. I mean, Reed Blankenship, he's solid, but he's not a starting safety in the National Football League.
Yeah, and I give Howie Roseman credit, because you make a decision and it doesn't really work out for your team. CJ Gardner-Johnson, he got hurt in Detroit, but other than that, he was still playing good football and playing the way that he played in Philly. He just got hurt this season. So I give him credit saying, you know what? I made a mistake. Let's go pay this guy and bring him back in our fold, because it's been interesting to even see the safety market this offseason, because for a while, people, I think, started to realize how important it was to have these safeties in your locker room, on your team, leading your defense, playing multiple positions, whether it's in the slot, whether it's blitzing, playing a deep part of the field. But then this year has been very surprising to me to see guys like Justin Simmons release, Quandre Diggs. I know Jamal Adams has been dealing with different injuries. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde's a free agent still. Like, you have all of these different guys who now all end up on the market. It's kind of baffled me, because each time we kind of break down these teams that go out and win these Super Bowls, we usually look up and say, they have really good safety play. They have safeties who are leaders, safeties who are aligning guys, who are helping everybody get ready to go. And it was no different that even the San Francisco defense, you take away Talanoa Hufanga, that whole defense changed, and was a big reason why they didn't compete at the level, I think, defensively as they did all year. What do you think about that when you talk about the safeties and teams kind of now discarding them and also not wanting to pay them the way they were the last few years?
Well, I don't think the teams are disregarding the safety position anymore. I mean, you start looking at guys that are getting paid. I know you made a lot of money, but you look at Minka Fitzpatrick, you look at Derwin James and these guys. Justin Simmons is a fantastic safety. And, he's a guy that's 6'2", 200 pounds. He can tackle, he can blitz, he can kind of do it all. I'm surprised that he's still sitting back on the market. A guy that nobody really talks about is Kyle Duggar. Kyle Duggar plays well. And people don't understand how difficult it is to play safety, to play linebacker, to play over the slot. And, you start mentioning some of the top safeties in this league, and I'm very interested to see who you think is the top safety. You want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is number one being the best, and we get to the worst, or you want to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? We start talking about.
Let's go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You'll go 5, and then I'll do my 5, and we'll go back and forth to see how this all works out. Who's your number 5 safety when you rank them?
Well, it was between Talanoa Hufanga and it was between Derwin James. And I had to go with Derwin because Derwin played this year. But the biggest problem with Derwin, I have him at 5, is because they don't play him the right way. They got him playing cover 2. They got him playing 22 yards back in the deep part of the field. If I'm coaching Derwin James, I'm taking him, I'm putting him over the slot, I'm blitzing him. He's going to be a factor in the run. He's going to line up all over the field. That's my number 5.
Yeah, I remember playing against him. We played, and it was like every single play. It was like Derwin James on the tackle, and we looked at the box score at the end of the game, 14 tackles, just all over the field. No, Derwin James is an unbelievable player. My number 5, I went with a guy that has great versatility, and you just talked about him. I have Justin Simmons as my number 5 guy. I think, for one, I remember when this guy was young, and he was on that Denver defense with T.J. Ward and Darren Stewart, and he would just come in different packages. And I remember sitting there like, man, this kid is pretty good. And to see just the way he took off, and you hit it earlier, I think his ability to always be in the right position. When they blitz him, he disguises it perfectly so he's free on the blitz. Then when he sits in that kind of robber area in their cover 4 schemes, he always finds the route. He understands route combinations. Jumps a pass, interception. He's just been so consistent. I mean, he's a free agent right now. He got released. He was a second-team All-Pro player last year. Like, what?
Bro,
I don't understand how teams are waiting.
If you're the Patriots, how do you not pick up the phone and call this guy? I mean, you lose a Devin McCourty, and now you lose an All-Pro safety in Devin McCourty, but now you have an opportunity to go out and get adjusted. Man, are you kidding me? That would have been one of the first calls I'm.
Same thing with Buffalo. You lose Hoyer and Hyde. I'm thinking you implement Justin Simmons in there, you get the same level of play in Buffalo that they kind of need on the defense. But who knows why no one has called this guy. He's one of the best safeties in football.
So for me, I'm looking at I really like Jesse Bates in Atlanta. I thought he had an outstanding year. I thought he was fantastic, tackling, really taking over that secondary. I thought he was worth all the money that they paid him.
Yeah, I love seeing it because he was able to continue what he did in Cincinnati at a new place and not skip a beat. Probably even played at a higher level, which doesn't always happen for free agents when you get to a new city. So it was cool to see Jesse Bates do that. My number 4 guy is another, I think, young and up-and-coming guy, Kyle Hamilton. Last year, phenomenal, just his ability. I mean, he was lining up in the slot on Jamar Chase against Cincinnati. And then he was going to blitz. Then he was playing in the deep part of the field, just does so many different things. And even in their loss in the AFC Championship game to Kansas City, I thought he was the one guy that just stuck out on that defense. Defense has a bunch of great players in Baltimore, but he just looks like he's moving at a different speed, running, hitting guys. He's physical. He's 6'3". I love watching Kyle Hamilton's game, and I love it because I play safety, and I look at him, and I'm like, how did we both play safety? What he's able to do with his size, I could never do. So it's a lot of fun watching him compete.
No doubt. I got a chance to watch him a lot, and I'm going to talk about him in a few. But I would say my number 3 safety would be Antoine Winfield Jr. You and I, we talked about him this year. We were really excited the way he played, the level of consistency in which he played. And we talked about it. Every time we watch this kid play, it seems like he's making a key play, interception, a strip sack, a hustle play, a tackle. He was just all over the place. Not a big safety, but plays big in his heart. He's my number 3 safety.
I love it. And my number 3 guy is the guy you just talked about earlier, Jesse Bates. I think, obviously, I said it before, what he did in Cincinnati, then going to Atlanta, I thought he was able to make a difference right away. They start off the season, play against a rookie quarterback, and he made sure everybody knew Bryce Young was a rookie quarterback. Goes out there, picks
And he
him
picked
off.
it off. I was watching that last night.
Yep. Picked him off in kind of the same way both times. And that's when you realize, like, all right, veteran safety, he's fearless. There's times I'm watching, I'm like, man, I think he's in the deep part of the field, but he didn't even backpedal. He just stood right there about 15 to 18 yards and played downhill and aggressive. I think he understands the game at a high level that allows him to make plays and play like that. So it's a lot of fun to watch, man. What you got in the top 2?
Top 2, I'm going with Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton was a young man that I was able to watch a lot. We had Baltimore a few times, 3 or 4 times last year. And I have to correct you. He is not 6'3". He's every inch of 6'4", and might be a little taller than 6'4". He is absolutely the biggest safety I've ever seen. And the way he's built, he's long, he's lean, but he's very strong and explosive. And just watching him and just spending some time with him, talking to him and asking him about what is he reading. He's not big and stiff. You see a lot of those guys big and stiff. They can't open up their hips. Like you said, he's going against a guy like Jamar Chase, who's 6 feet tall. He's jamming him, and he doesn't look out of place. Kyle Hamilton will be the best safety in the National Football League if he stays healthy this year. He can do it all, bro.
I wouldn't argue with that at all. I think he's phenomenal. My number 2 guy, it seems like he's an older veteran now, but he's still a young guy. I think Minkah Fitzpatrick in Pittsburgh, I think he didn't obviously have the year he wanted to, only playing in 10 games this past season, dealing with injuries. But I think what I've always loved about his game, he was in Miami, and I had Brian Flores as a safety coach. So when Flo goes to Miami, I'm thinking like sky's the limit for Minkah Fitzpatrick. He was outspoken that he didn't like the defense that he was in. He didn't think that they were using the right way. And they ship him out of there and they send him to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh puts him at free safety, and all you see is greatness come out of this guy. He knew what he needed to do on the field, where he needed to be. Pittsburgh gave him the keys. And the times that Pittsburgh struggled on defense, I thought it was primarily because Minkah was out and he wasn't in there to lead that group in the secondary, to be their guy. So I'm looking for him to have a great year this year, to come back. And again, he's a Jersey guy, played high school football in Jersey, so I've been hearing about him for years. So it's fun to see how he's able to execute and play at a high level in the NFL.
Yeah, it was really fun for me to come up with my number 1 safety in the league, and a guy that played all over the field in college, played at the University of Alabama, and you just talked about him, Minkah Fitzpatrick. Hands down, man, just watching him, he can play in the slot, which he played in college. He can play safety. He can play corner. I mean, this is a guy that really literally reminds me of Charles Woodson. And I told Charles, I said, I believe that you and Rod Woodson are the 2 guys that could play every position in the secondary and be an all-pro. And that's Minkah Fitzpatrick. He could be a cornerback left, right, because he studies, he prepares, he works. He's a great team guy. He is just a fantastic player. It's like he's like you. He's got corner skills, safety instincts, tough, and can just do it all. Just a fantastic player. And you're right. Last year, when they struggled at times on defense, it's because he wasn't back there leading the group, getting everybody lined up, making all the checks and adjustments, all the things that great safeties do.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. Like, it's 27 years old. He's at the age usually where people are like, well, we're about to see his best years in football, 27 to 30, like that prime range. And he's already had all these all-pro seasons. My number 1 guy is the guy you mentioned earlier. I think Antoine Winfield Jr. is just an amazing watch. I think his ability to even play as big as he plays, he's not a big guy. And I think it's interesting because I remember being young in the league and watching Antoine Winfield playing in the nickel spot and be blitzing and be having interceptions. And then his son comes in and it's very similar. First gets in the NFL, yeah, he's playing safety, but he's playing more of the nickel. Todd Bowles has him doing so many different things. Then he gets back there and he's playing more safety and still some nickel sprinkled in there. And I just think his playmaking ability, it's not just the interceptions and the sacks. but it's running guys down, stripping the ball out against Carolina at the 2-yard line, causing a touchback. It's all of his instinctual plays that just show up over and over again in any type of game. They can be winning, they could be behind. He somehow makes that play to help the team. I think he's a young guy. I think he's the next up-and-coming guy. And I think what's so fun about this whole group is they're going to continue to have to battle. Like, we didn't even name guys like Xavier McKinney, Javon Holland. You mentioned Kyle Duggar earlier. Like, all of these different guys are just unbelievable safeties. Ufunga, who you mentioned, like, we're going to get to watch this next group of like 7 to 8 guys, and I'm sure more guys will get sprinkled in there, are going to go out and battle each year for 4 All-Pro spots every single year at a Pro Bowl. So it's going to be fun to watch if you love watching safety play.
So the only one that we didn't agree on really was the Justin Simmons and the Derwin James, huh?
Yep. That's the only one. And I mean, those guys, I mean, Derwin James, I think, like you said, was 100% right. He needs to be in a system that uses him to the best of his abilities. And I'm excited to see him this year now with a new coaching staff to see how they use him. But what was so interesting to me about Derwin James is I was more impressed when I used to watch them show practice clips. He'd be doing one-on-ones with Keenan Allen, who was one of the most shiftiest guys I have to cover. And Derwin James would be all over him. So he's just, to me, he's an unbelievable player that needs to get back in the right spots to have that kind of impact on the game.
Yeah, and and Coach Harbaugh, I played with Coach Harbaugh when he was in San Diego for maybe 2 or 3 years. He's gonna have that offense going. They're gonna run the football, but you better believe they're gonna take their best defensive player and they're gonna put him in a position where he can make more plays and he can have more of an impact. Because watching as we prepare for these games this past season, I would get so frustrated. I said, you have Derwin James. You could put any safety, any body, any person back there to back paddle 22 yards. You want him closer to the action. You want him involved, causing havoc. And, they just didn't play him the right way.
It's funny. When you say that, I think about what Bill used to always tell us in meetings. Good players can't overcome bad coaching. I used to always hear whenever I see a guy out of position, I'm like, that's just bad coaching. He can't overcome it. Bill was right. And honestly, speaking of Bill, checking out and watching the Dynasty, I thought it was so cool. And we talked about it before we got on air a little bit. Watching the beginning part of the Dynasty documentary, I wasn't a part of that. So that was all like watching from a fan, but also watching and knowing, like, my time in New England, we always looked up to what you guys did before us. And we were also very envious. We were like, man, we got to do that. We got to catch those guys. And Bill will remind us all the time. Anytime you did something, he will remind you, well, Rodney didn't do that. Willie McGinnis didn't do that. You think Teddy Bruschi, these guys just compete drinking water. Like, we heard all of the stories. And then I got there with Vince Wilfork. He would tell me Ty Law stories or different things. So we always, as this young core, was like, man, how do we catch these guys? How do we do what they did? And very fortunate I got to play with Brady and Vince and those guys that tapped into the guys before us and spread all of the things that they learned from you guys. But what did you think, watching the Patriots documentary and just living back in those memories?
Well, to be honest with you, I watched the first one and I watched a little bit of the second, and I hadn't watched any since. And I felt like when I was watching it, I know about the Spygate and all that stuff, but it just seemed so Tom and Bill centric and Kraft. I didn't enjoy it. I stopped because it didn't tell the stories like of me coming and Corey Dillon, and it was centered around some things that I wasn't really feeling, and I just stopped watching. I mean, I interviewed for 5 or 6 hours. I was in New York, and all they had me saying was "mom." Like, that's it. That's all I saw myself say. Like, I have a lot of input into Tom and how these guys treated me and the things that happened that led to me signing here. That was a big deal. I wasn't a big fan of it.
So somebody asked me about my takeaway, and that was my biggest takeaway. I felt like I got kind of duped because I was just like you. I did like 4 or 5 hours in New York, and then I did another like 2 or 3 hours in Massachusetts. And I was like, man, this is going to be great. Like the storytelling, we're talking about this and we're talking about that. And then I watched and I was just like, man, like only things I said that could come across as negative towards Bill was the only thing. Like, I mean, I had different kind of quick sentences on things, but the longest thing I talked about was 2016 with Trump and the letter and everything. And I thought that was probably the worst part, that everything that we all gave to the 20 years that it encompassed, they only hit anything that was negative. I thought 2010 was like a changing of the guard for so many different things with New England. Like some of the older players were gone, and it was just like every move had to be made right to try to move on. And the only thing they talked about was Aaron Hernandez. All they talked about was Chico. And I just thought, like you said, missed a lot of the great stories. Even like to me, you talk about Bill and everything with Trump. Bill was a big reason we helped a guy get released from prison after 28 years in prison. He was one of the first people after I read and told everybody about this story. He raised his hand and he said, how do we help? He said, I'm willing to sign my name on a letter that goes in the governor. And you know the impact of Bill Belichick's name on anything in Massachusetts. And I thought that shows so much growth and change of how he saw things outside of football compared to years before. And it was just like, well, that'll make him look good, so we're not going to include that. So I thought that was some of the things of like, hey, we won at a high level and guys stayed there. Like I could have left 2 times. I signed back. There's reasons why.
And, you know, the thing, too, you know, Bill was a hell of a coach. Like they act like the last 3 or 4 years, because the Patriots have struggled, that Bill can't coach. You give me one game and you give me Bill X's and O's, I'll take him over anybody. All right? Because he's going to make sure that you're prepared. And I just didn't like the way that he was made out. Yeah, Bill made some mistakes and he wasn't always the nicest or the purest guy. But at the end of the day, he always did whatever he had to do to make the team better. And he always treated me fair. I felt like he treated other players fair. He always wanted open competition. And to make a documentary like that and to just absolutely kind of kill who he is and the opportunities. Like, think about this. He gave me an opportunity, a 5th-round draft choice. He gave Tom Brady an opportunity. He set down $100 million quarterback when no one thought it was popular and started Tom Brady. Okay, Wes Welker, he went out and got him. Julian Edelman, a former quarterback. He gives guys who are the underdog an opportunity. No one talks about that. When everybody else is done with a guy, he brings in a Corey Dillon. He brings in a Randy Moss. He brings in a Rodney Harrison. He goes drafts Devin McCourty. He knows what he was doing back then, and I just don't think that he got enough credit, enough respect, enough props. Man, this dude is the greatest coach of all time. I mean, to be able to handle that many personalities, to be able to deal with Tom, handle a young star quarterback, another $100 million quarterback, it was a lot going on. And trust me, I'm happy that I wasn't Bill Belichick back then, but he had to make some tough decisions, and everybody's not going to like it.
That's so true. And one of the bigger names, too, Malcolm Butler, was, forget undrafted free agent, he was a tryout guy. Like, he came on these random tryout days. So for the head coach to even show up and fully be into watching a bunch of guys that probably had no shot at playing the NFL except for this one guy, and he ends up a Pro Bowl player, an All-Pro player, and one of the biggest plays in Super Bowl history. And I agree with you. It just wasn't – they didn't dwell on enough. The only time I felt like you really understood the X's and O's of coaching is when they showed Super Bowl 53 and they showed what we were able to do to the Rams defense. Was the only time that I think from the outside looking in, you were like, oh, wow, like he really thought of doing all of this. Other than that, it was just about management and all the other nonsense. But I think even moving on another story time, last words, what did you think as you watched Aaron Donald's career? Was there another player that in your time playing you felt was similar to the domination that Aaron Donald had in each, like 10 seasons, 10 Pro Bowls, 8 first-team All-Pros? Is there another guy that you think that had a career like that?
I would say a guy that I was really, before I was riding him, it was J.J. Watt. You know, just as a broadcaster, just seeing J.J. Watt's career, he was like a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He was dominant. But the difference was, you look at Aaron Donald, you look at his size. I'm taller than Aaron Donald. I'm 6'1", maybe 6'1 and a half. Aaron Donald's 6 feet tall. He's 280 pounds. And to see these big offensive linemen face Aaron Donald and see the constant double teams. He was my favorite player the last 8, 9, 10 years. To see the constant double teams, the chips and all the things, and just to see him continue to be that productive player and be able. When was the last time we saw a defensive player like that really just be able to take over the game? Lawrence Taylor, J.J. Watt, those guys, Reggie White. I mean, he's top 10 greatest player defense that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I always tell people my greatest Aaron Donald just story, Super Bowl 53, we're getting ready for the game. And, you're sitting in those squad meetings and Bill gets going and he's like, this guy will ruin the effing game. We're only going to leave him 1-1 once or twice. And it's always funny because as a player, he knew how to piss you off enough to bring the best out of you. I remember he looked at Shaq Mason and Joe Tooney and he was like, can we block him just 1 or 2 times in the game one-on-one? Is that even possible? And those guys were so hungry and they did a great job. The couple times they blocked him one-on-one, but it was the way Bill would show. We would watch all his highlights, not just the offensive line, but as a team. We would sit in there
Superman
and watch Aaron Donald, and you're just this is amazing. So just to see the way he was able to dominate and do it in his time period, he obviously could still play if he wanted to, but to say, hey, I got 10 years in, I won a Super Bowl, I did everything I wanted to do. I can't wait to see whatever he wants to get into next. But the dude was unbelievable. And another guy, I played in the Big East, played at Rutgers. So what he was able to do coming from Pitt as a smaller defensive lineman, I always used to just look and idolize, man, that's amazing to see what he was able to do in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm really proud of him too, because, a lot of guys stay in the league too long. And you look at him, he's made his money. He won a championship. He was the most dominant player the last decade. And now he's moving forward, and now, we talk about the CTE, all the head injuries and things like that. And, we need to see more guys be able to walk away on their own and say, you know what, I made a couple $100 million. I'm good. You know what I mean? I don't need the fame. I don't need this. I'm going to go spend time with my family, my kids. I'm going to make sure that I'm a present dad, a present husband. And that's a lot of work, but I'm extremely proud for him. I'm happy for him. And I wish him nothing but the best.
Man, I couldn't say it any better. I think that's a great way to end. Rodney, I appreciate you sitting down with me on the Football Night in America podcast that we got going, man. Big shout out to Aaron Donald, what he did. Rodney, enjoy the rest of the offseason. I'm sure we'll catch up again, man.
You too, man. Great seeing you, man. And great job. Thank you, Devin.
No problem, man.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.